The addition of a new 3-age structure with complementary crisis and evolving civilizations feature is one of the most ambitious and often confusing mechanics in Civilization 7. There are so many moving pieces and it's often hard to know what changes, what stays the same, and what the heck is an age progression point. I walk through everything that you need to know about the crisis, legacy points, and first age transition here in this installment of A Nerd's Guide to Civilization 7. Hello, nerds, and welcome back. We have the beginning of our crisis, the rising storm. The great civilizations of the world have risen, and in theirs rise others too ascended. Those once thought barbarians now lay equal claim to the mantle of civilization. With this comes the question, why are you ascendant and we are not? We can continue the crisis here, and that actually spawns the first barbarian invasion crisis. I like the crisis systems. They are super cool. I think they are very punishing, but it actually gives a little bit of a reason as to why your civ would want to transition into another civilization in the first place. There are 3 of them so far in the base game. The first one being the literal plague, where like the Black Death comes in and just smashes your civilization, and you have to try to stifle its effects with these early positions. Then there's the open rebellion, where your empire can literally fall apart from the increasing happiness demands, where cities can literally flip-flop between different civilizations like a crazed up loyalty mechanic. And lastly is what we have, the Barbarian Invasion. These will spawn anywhere in open tiles that are available. Because the AI didn't settle these areas, they have barbarians spawning. We have this one spawning here. Funny enough, because India has spawned in this area, there's really no barbarians near the south. It is literally just this one to deal with. The crisis will always appear when you reach 70% of the age progression on standard speed. You'll notice we're way past that. Turns out when you full kill a civilization, you significantly increase the age progression. Last turn when we killed Hatshepsut, we jumped from 68% to 84% progression. It's almost 20%. But I want to bring up the crisis policy system. You see, the age begins, the crisis intensifies, and the crisis culminates. This crisis system will begin lightly. You only have to plug in one of the policies, but will intensify the further you get through the age. You can see, because this is the Barbarian Invasion, I have the choice to plug in 3 different policies. Each of these kind of reflect different issues when your empire has grown too big to manage, and now you're being invaded by barbarian clans in multiple different locations across your empire. All of these cards are negative towards me. So I'm plugging the inferior tactics card, which actually gives -6 combat strength when fighting these independent powers, these barbarians. Tribute here is the idea that these city-states, as they're getting stronger, demand more from us as opposed to them just helping us out. So plus -10 gold for each city-state you're choosing of. And then there's Barbarian Mercenaries. This is essentially the increase of the gold cost to maintain an army that has to deal with constant barbarian invasions throughout your entire empire. I'm going to plug in inferior tactics here because having strong barbarian camps is kind of fun, personally. But also I have a pretty strong build against fighting independent powers already, so I should be able to handle these. I did want to point out something that's really, really cool about Civilization 7. You can see, because we have conquered Egypt here and we have new 3 Egyptian cities, you'll notice that there's a very specific building here, the mastaba, that is not Roman. This is actually one of Egypt's unique buildings. In previous Civ titles, whenever you conquered a civilization, you would lose access to any type of their unique buildings, their unique tile improvements, basically anything that was theirs, you did not get to keep. That is now not the same for Civilization 7. Not only am I Rome that can build my own unique buildings, like the Temple of Jupiter and the Basilica, as well as creating my unique quarter, but also I have now inherited not only Egyptian cities with Egyptian names, but actually Egyptian architecture as well. We replaced their palace with our city hall, but we do keep the mastaba, as well as if a civ has unique tile improvements, you do keep those as well. So for instance, if you saw some Great Wall of China, if you conquer those cities, you keep the Great Wall, which is so much fun. I do have a -6 combat strength against these independent powers. I have so many other combat modifiers that we should be able to deal with this little barbarian clan no problem. After your crisis begins, you do need to start really keeping track of the age progression because the end of the age is coming and we need to make sure that we complete all of our goals before the era flips. You'll see we're at 84% age progression, but what exactly does that mean? Well, if you hover over the number directly, you see the age progress is actually 167 out of 200. For standard speed, this number ticks up by 1 every single turn. So if nothing else happened in your game, the full antiquity age would take 200 turns to complete. You can see even though it's at turn 102, we're already at age progress 167 because we've hit certain milestones to increase the age progression. So if we look at the first militaristic milestone, that gave us +5 age progression, and we got a second one here, so another +5 age progression. The moment we hit the third milestone, we'll get +10 age progression, which is a whole 5% of the age. If I settle one more city, we'll go from 84% to 89%. This of course includes the other legacy paths as well, so we hit 2 cultural milestones, so that's a whole +5 age progression here, as well as the economic, we've hit 2 milestones, so +5 and +5. And scientific, we have not hit this, but if we look over here, Confucius has, meaning he's right here. And you can even see that the first age progression here has already been hit. The second one hasn't been hit yet, but he's only 1 codec away from hitting this. Who knows how long it'll take for him to get all the way to the scientific golden age, but if we look at rankings, not only can we see who has done what in each of the legacy paths, we can see how much of the age progression has been advanced in each specific legacy path. The first player to hit a milestone triggers this age progression. Multiple players hitting the same milestone does not. That's why you can see this is already checked even though we haven't hit it. How fast the era moves is completely determined by how fast you and the other players in your lobby are completing your goals. That means each legacy path is contributing 10% of the age progression. We also noticed that full killing a player does add like a crazy amount to the age progression. So I want to try to finish these legacy paths to get bonuses into the next era, but completing these legacy paths also brings on the next era. That does mean that you have to prioritize which of the legacy paths you'll be going for. In this, we prioritize military. In Pax Imperator, I only need 1 more city point in order to complete. And actually, I just realized that my unique commander here, the Legatus, actually has a special ability where he can settle cities for every 3 levels that he has. As a level 6 Legatus, he actually can settle 2 cities for me right now. Meaning that this military legacy path is almost completed. You'll notice there's a whole bunch of icons here. This is basically just showing off what you unlock by hitting each of these milestones. The first milestone being the first militaristic legacy point, but also you gain a militaristic attribute and an expansionist attribute. Once you hit the second milestone, you unlock the fealty legacy bonus, giving you +2 settlement limit. This one's almost always fantastic to get to. And the third one gives you a 3rd legacy point and unlocks the Pax Imperatoria Golden Age, which allows you to get free infantry units at every settlement that you conquered last age. If you don't hit the first milestone in a legacy path, say like for this scientific one, you actually do unlock Dark Ages. Now, the scientific Dark Age here is quite powerful. You gain a random technology every 5 boosts, but you have 50% less science. You can only pick a single Golden Age or a single Dark Age ability on the next era. Right now, my goals are to finish the militaristic legacy path as well as the economic, and hopefully we can build 3 more wonders to finish the cultural legacy path as well. Because the economic legacy path needs me to get more resources in all my settlements, right now I'm getting a couple of merchants to try to get copies of their resources. I'll finally get this iron improved. Rome is going to focus on some of these late era buildings like the arena and the villa, which are the 2 happiness buildings. I'll also keep an eye out for the amphitheaters and academies, which are the late era culture and science buildings. Because they get adjacency to mountains, I can put these in the same quarter together, really spreading out the capital. Now, I'll note that these barbarian camps are technically independent powers, so you can actually use your influence to defend them or also tell them to target other civs. But considering it's pretty late in the era, I don't really want to invest into them because they're not going to last when the era transitions. A lot of text to finish. I'll be taking the science per turn here. I have a very big army, so I'll be taking conscription to reduce unit maintenance. I'll be able to kill this unit pretty dang quickly, and even using my flanking to get 50 strength on this legion. And you can see the capital of Egypt, Waset, here now is under my official control. And I can even use gold to very quickly undo all of the pillaging that I did over here, getting this city right back online as quickly as possible. All of these are relatively cheap fixes to do. Much better. Looks like Confucius is building the Colossus here. Ooh, very nice, buddy. This unlocks currency. Currency is actually an incredibly important tech because not only does it give you access to the bath and the market, but it also allows you to use a specialist on your urban tiles. In the meantime, I'm going to pick up the Masonry Mastery. This gives +1 production on all production buildings. So these quarters here, like this quarter with a brickyard and a saw pit, which give +1 production each, will go from +2 production to +4 production, which is quite useful. While things are close to the end of the era, when you're building things in your cities, you want to be keeping out for these ageless tags. Ageless means that all of the yields that you see will carry forward on the era transition. So between being a unit quarter as well as being ageless, they are absolutely a priority to get online. While in range, I will then disperse this independent power. Give me 50 culture immediately. You'll notice these barbarian clans only give you half the amount of the culture that the original independent powers would have. At this point of the game, you should be able to clear them relatively quickly. If you have a military, that is. Now that the city is growing, I actually can show off what specialists are like. Because we have currency and we have our first specialist limit, now instead of putting population on only rural tiles, creating rural districts, you can actually use a population and put them directly onto a urban district. By doing this, you'll be increasing the science and the cultural yield of a tile, but you'll be adding additional food and happiness requirements for the specialists. So for instance, if we put a specialist on the library here, we'll get +3 science and +2 culture, but this guy will consume an additional 2 food and 2 happiness. I'm gonna go ahead and place a specialist on this library tile. Now you can see we have 7 science and 2 culture. Of course, you're going to want to try to have 2 buildings inside of this quarter. I can go ahead and put a barracks, making this now a +5 production and +7 and 2 culture tile. Nice, right? The more urbanized your cities will get, the more food you'll be needing from towns to try to feed those cities. So keep this in mind as you're expanding. Now, towards the end of the civic tree, you'll start to see there's a lot of wonders and very specific cultural policies that can be strong in towards the end of the era. Very importantly is the mastery to citizenship, which actually gives you another endeavor called wonder construction, granting a bonus to wonder production between you and your ally. We have now become a citizen of another city-state. This is a cultural city-state. We get little bonuses to either culture on our monuments, or free civics when we become citizen of a city-state, or even production towards wonders. Arch could really help you finish a cultural legacy path, but because we're Rome and I have monuments in not only every city, but every town as well, I think the +2 culture on monuments for every city-state you're a citizen of, so that actually becomes +4 culture in almost every city. Yeah, that was like 30 culture per turn. That's huge. The hub of culture. So we can take 25 culture flat, or +1 production on all of our monuments. I think we'll take the production on our monuments. Yeah, +1 production on monuments is huge here. All right, we have our trader here. We can finally get access to that 3rd iron. Now all of our legions have +3 combat strength, which is really fun. There's the masonry tech giving me +1 production on all of my production buildings. You can see this is now a 4 production quarter between the brickyard and the saw pit. I've been finding your choice in figuring out which techs and which masteries to beeline is very important in the early game, but getting the mastery for masonry is probably a power spike that I definitely missed out on in this game. I'm then gonna go for the mastery for writing, giving me additional science on our science buildings and trying to get more libraries built. So barbarians turning towards our cities. The crisis expands. Now there's 2 policy slots we need to fill here, and there's even more choices to pick. Rebellious commanders will decrease happiness in all your cities for each commander level someone has. The bigger the head of the commander, the more happy he makes everyone. That's hilarious. Banditry, -5 gold for every imported resource. Think about this as like bandits literally stealing money from your merchants. And decentralization, -75% gold and food in towns with a specialization. I really hate this card. And I have a very big military. I'm just going to take the tribute because I know this is just negative 20 gold per turn, and that's easy to calculate. And now that I have the gold, I'm actually going to start converting some of my major towns into cities. So by converting our Egyptian capital here to a city, not only do we now have a production queue, and we can even build special things like, of course, our Roman unique infrastructure right next to the Egyptian infrastructure, which I think would be a ton of fun. Little UI adjustment that was added. There's actually showing these errors that show adjacency now. I don't know if anyone else has been highlighting that, but anyways, I'll be plugging my Roman infrastructure right next to the Egyptian infrastructure, and you can see currently our history being built. I can now also plug some new resources into this city, giving +4 food, +4 production, and then I'll be plugging in some extra culture into the capital. Rome can actually now start building some of these additional wonders. I see a very nice place for the Wei Young Palace right here, adjacent to 2 happiness buildings and additional food, so you can see that's reflected in the UI. In addition to the +6 influence that provides, and move our population down here to a nice fishing boat. Now, I realized when you set a town to a town focus, you can't switch it to a different focus throughout the entire era. But what you can do is actually switch back to growth, meaning that this town can actually start growing again and get closer to these camels, which will help us get more slots for us to plug in more resources. You'll note I don't really need my tier 3 military units. Yes, tier 3 legions would be a ton of fun, but most of my conquest, I think, is done for the era, simply because I do not need to do anymore. I could. I have the army right here, but I don't need to. So Aquila is actually back to growing, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab this wood tile to culture bomb towards the camels. Next growth, I'll be able to grab the camels. Our Egyptian capital is gonna finish our Roman quarter. Dude, I still love that. And I can actually use this commander to go ahead and settle a city right here, completing our military objective and securing a military golden age, giving us access to 3 militaristic legacy points for the next era. But you see, completing that legacy path actually does boost up the age progression quite considerably, giving a +10 age progression. So how quickly you finish each of these legacy paths is completely up to you. If you want to push the era ahead more quickly, you can finish them as fast as possible, or you can try to time the completion of them so that they all complete at the same time, so you can complete as many as possible. Ashoka is denouncing me. I'm going to keep an eye on him. I don't think that these towns can actually stay here for too much longer. You'll notice that we did actually go over our settlement cap when we settled this town. That actually gives us -5 happiness in all of our settlements, but most of them are still happy. Well, not you. Famia here is unhappy and actually suffering a little bit of unhappiness. Go ahead and use a little bit of gold to buy it a villa, and then to bring it back up to a baseline of 0 happiness. So happy, dude. Look at it. Look at how happy 0 happy is. That's amazing. Looks like Cham's actually back here. The barbarian clans do continue to spawn each time the era intensifies. This town does need some gold investment to fix a lot of the stuff that we broke. And then this town will be working on the Emily Bell. A quick correction from my previous video, this 12 gold per turn here is actually the gold that goes to China for establishing a trade route in exchange for getting copies of all of his resources present in this city. Also note that water trade routes have a significant advantage when it comes to their range. Having access to the coast is very strong. This actually unlocks the Majapa Heat as well. Resources here like ivory get very important when finishing the era. The Weijing Palace is on grassland, so it's actually having a 20% production bonus from marble, while the Emila Bell here on a plains tile is getting a 40% production model from ivory. And you can see stacking these bonuses are quite effective. Now we need to pick 2 more crises. And I don't want to deal with the unhappiness problem. I'll be just taking the gold hit, right? -5 gold for every imported resource, as well as barbarian mercenaries, 100% gold to maintain military units. Taking me from 131 gold down to 66. Hey, you just took out half my gold per turn. Jeez. Okay. So depending on the crisis that you get and the setup that you have set up, these may be strong and really annoying, and some you'll be able to work around. Oh, it looks like Cham is actually coming. Okay, let me pull my archers over here, as well as my military. You'll notice that Confucius has pushed into 6 codices, so he's actually pushing the era ahead as well, which means I need to get ready for this era to flip and finish my legacy objectives. Wow, we're real close on this one. I think because of the mountains here.
Goes on.
I can build a bath here on the same tile as our fishing key. Our fishing key. Thank you, everyone, for correcting me on that one. But that'll be big food per turn on that tile. So we know with the age progression at turn 195 out of 200 that we have at most 5 turns left in the era. So I'll be able to finish this wonder, and I need one more. Oh no, I'm gonna be one wonder short. There's some wonders that are unlocked in the tech tree, and there are quite a few more wonders that are unlocked in the civic tree. Especially prioritizing high culture will help you get through your wonder building legacy path, and prioritizing high science will help you get to all of the masteries to grab all of the codex for your scientific legacy path. Of course, this was a primarily militaristic game, while we also try to focus on a little bit of culture and a little bit of econ. Our wonder construction project, I should have done this a little bit ago, but this will give us another 10% production towards our wonders. Towards the end of the era, you can also do our research projects. This gives you culture equal to 25% of the city's production. You're also able to queue them up if you just want to never touch a city again. Oh my god, you can put so many on. Okay. So if you never want to touch a city ever, you can just queue these up indefinitely. Roma's going to build a market. There's a +6 market right here with the garden, high gold, high food, and even start taking a couple units out with our boat. Nice.
In the midst of the snows of the old kingdom.
Amazing. We're at 99 progression. We only have 2 turns left in the era. That does mean we're not going to be able to complete the last wonder for the cultural legacy path, but that is okay. Instead, I'm just going to build walls in this border city. Oh, we got the diplomatic attribute point because we've been playing a very domination-focused game. I'm focusing mostly on the happiness so that we don't have to deal with the concerns of our citizens nearly as much. Because every town has a poorly named city hall. This is something that should be probably called a town hall if it's a town, and a city hall if it's a city. But you'll see here, yeah, city hall in towns. Obviously, that's a super minor thing. And see 198, someone just built a wonder. And you'll notice it says 100% progression, but it's still at 199 out of 208 progression. It means we have one more turn to finish anything we need before the era flips. So I'm gonna go ahead and wipe out these barbs. We got another promotion on our commander on the last turn, fantastic. We have a narrative of choice. We are now ending a world broken. The scourge has ended. The world yet turns. The peoples displaced with their homelands make new homes where they have settled. Forever gone is a world of a singular city and a vast barbarian hitherland. The ancient era has passed on a new time of interconnection. Even we have not remained untouched as a wave of refugees and immigrants reshape who we are, what tongues we speak, and what stories we tell. Age is ending. I do need to make sure I spend my last bit of gold making sure I fill out these 2 last slots. You can see I actually have 1 more slot because I just built a market. Markets actually give +1 resource limit. I'll be able to place this silk here, and then buy a market here. I'll be able to place a resource in this city, completing our economic legacy path. Fantastic. That means we'll have a golden age for military, economic. We just are missing out on the cultural golden age, which is okay because at least we got the first 2 milestones, and science, we got nothing. Might as well one-turn walls in the capital of Rome. Go ahead, nice little flank killing that last unit. I'll quickly show the unit list here because I'm going to return to this after the age transition, but you can see I have my scouts, my army commander, my trade routes, my legions, my chariot, my archer, my ballista. Now, for those wondering what happens to the techs and civics that you do not complete before an era flips, the short answer is they don't really matter. So if you look at this civic tree, the end of the civic tree is mostly wonders, which won't be available to build next era, and policy cards, but all of these will be disappearing in the next era because the policy cards are no longer applicable in the next era. Now, if you do have enough science, advancing the tech all the way up to mathematics, even though we've never built our academies, it doesn't matter because the next era is going to have 2 other new science buildings. Instead of building libraries and academies, what you'll want to be building is observatories and universities. Unlocking your tier 3 military units also won't matter because you're just going to be going straight to your tier 1 exploration area units. Those high science players that did go through the tech tree and finished all the masteries, you of course got all of the codex in order to get your scientific legacy points. But then if you go ahead and are high enough tech to complete future tech, you get additional wildcard attribute points to spend in the next era. You start with free technologies in the next age, and you also advance the era even faster. So there is a benefit to having high science in the game, but is not going to be any detriment to not complete a technology tree either, for the sake of the next era. How you prioritize advancing technologies, advancing civics, is completely up to you. Whether or not you try to complete everything, you skip certain things that aren't going to be required later, or you go beelining straight for future tech to advance the era more quickly to make sure that your opponents go into Dark Ages and aren't able to complete their objectives. It's completely open-ended. It sounds weird. It's going to make sense when we get there. And with that, with the close, with the expansion of a 9-city Roman Empire to the south, to the north, to the west, and then conquered out all the way to the east, having access to both coasts, east and west, we have a very good start on what will be a very fun exploration age. No, disasters actually happen on the age transition. Like, it actually ruined one of my games where like a blizzard blew through my capital, killing all of my libraries, which undisplayed my codices, and also killed all my tiles, which means all of my resources weren't able to be put in my cities anymore. So I like lost 2 legacy conditions on the turn rollover. So hopefully someone makes it so that disasters don't happen on last turn, because there's nothing you can do about it. Thank you, please. So this video, of course, will be reflective of what victory condition you went for. This sounds like it actually is playing for the Roman economic victory instead of the militaristic one, probably because that was the most recent one I completed. You can see you get the rewards all labeled out for you based off of what you have completed throughout the game. We got all this stuff going into the next era. You can see the age rankings, so you can see we were the leader for Wonders of the Ancient World, Pax Imperator, and Silk Roads, and it looks like Confucius was one codec away from completing a golden age for science. Again, this is on sovereign difficulty, and I've been playing the Ancient Era quite substantially. You can see we have 8 legacy points. Confucius had 6. Ashoka has 1, but remember Egypt, who was in last, has been eliminated and it's 0. I realize I haven't talked about it before, but you do gain experience now from every age that you complete, both to your player level and also to each individual leader, which you can level up the more you play them. But now we can transition into the next age. This will bring you up to a new civ selection screen because, of course, our civilization now has to transition and adapt into a new world, a new type of civilization. You can see we have certain civilizations that we unlocked by what we did in the game, such as the Inca for settling mountains and much Bahit for having naval trade routes. Lock civs include Abbasid, Chola, and Hawaii because we didn't do the things that are required to unlock them. So you can't pick any civ, but we can play Spain because of Rome, but also the Normans. So I will be going ahead and picking the Normans here, not only because the Normans have been less shown online, but specifically because the Normans are a ton of fun. Now, Rome transitioning into the Normans is an interesting story, so let me give you a simplified history lesson. We all know Rome in all its glory, but it did begin to weaken significantly with the crisis of the 3rd century, where the Roman Empire nearly collapsed upon the combined pressures of repeated foreign barbarian invasions, civil wars, and economic disintegration. This, of course, being a large inspiration for the crisis system, as well as the actual crises that we see represented in Civ 7. But most notably is this year, 395 AD, where the Roman Empire was effectively split in half. The Western Roman Empire centered around Rome, and the Eastern Roman Empire centered around Constantinople, which became known as the Byzantine Empire, which far outlasted Rome. The fall of Rome specifically refers to the decline of the Western Empire, especially from the waves of Germanic tribes invading from the north and literally sacking the city of Rome. That is why I love the concept of using a barbarian invasion to literally cause the fall of our Roman Empire here. And although I, as a player, handle my barbarians very well, the same can't be said for the real-time Rome, where the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Vandals, Lombards, Saxons, and Franks all took up turns carving up Rome and its lands, forming new kingdoms. You'll notice that the very first year represented in the Exploration Age is 400 CE, a very deliberate year the developers chose, and my theory being the approximate year of the collapse of Rome. Obviously, there are tons of different civilizations that the large Roman Empire broke up into, and many that could have been represented as immediate or eventual successors to Rome from all the empires that formed after the West's fall. Notably, in the northern empire of modern-day France, you had the Kingdom of the Franks from approximately early 500 to the mid-800s, led by the first Roman Emperor Charlemagne, who is a leader in Civilization 7, and probably a hint that Francia, or even a Holy Roman Empire, will be a DLC at some point. But our story actually picks up later, around the 10th century, out of the crumbling of West Francia. Now, the people known as the Normans arose from the populations in the medieval Duchy of Normandy, from the intermingling between Norse Viking settlers and the locals of West Francia. When a Viking leader, Rollo, agreed to swear fealty to King Charles III in 911 CE, leading to the formation of the County of Rouen. This marriage of Norse folk and native West Franks in Normandy produced an ethnic and cultural Norman identity, which later developed into a unique dynasty, famous for conquering local and far and distant lands, including much of the English Isles, Ireland, Iberia, Italy, and even far off parts of Africa and the Middle East. Needless to say, with their Frankish and Viking heritage and desire for adventure, the Normans will be a very fun civilization to play into the medieval and Renaissance eras of the exploration age. So you can unlock the Normans by playing as Rome, Greece, or even playing as Charlemagne. And with the new era, we have a new civilization with new abilities applicable for that new era, including the Chevalier, which is our unique cavalry unit, and the Sokoman, who's a unique settler that found city with walls. And combine that with a +1 movement from embarked land units on adjacent to coast, as well as the combat strength, and you get some really fast islands settled that are easy to defend, as well as actual island conquest. Our unique buildings are the moat, which gives happiness in rough terrain, and the bailey, which gives +4 culture and additional culture to medieval walls and wonders. Nice. Put the moat and the bailey together, you get a unique quarter, the moat and bailey, or the donjon. You receive a free Chevalier unit when completed. So lots of horses, lots of movement, lots of settling, very defendable, very conquest, feels very much like a nice transition from Rome. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit choose Norman here.
The winds rise, and the Normans
And we have our immortal Augustus now leading our new Norman kingdom. The Normans sailed from the conquest of their minds. Originally from Scandinavia, they sat unquietly in northern France for just over a century before seizing England in 1066. They brought court culture, French language, and weapons of war. Knights rode out from stone castles, pursuing the values of chivalry. The Normans never truly disappeared, but merged with local populations, creating the Allemande, what we call English today. Of course, being a hint of who the Normans evolve into, especially in the first announced DLC. And so begins the first turn of the exploration era. In the year 400 of the Common Era, we have a brand new looking empire. And you can see the capital of Rome has changed. Our palace is now a Norman palace, but not all of the infrastructure has changed. You see, of course, we have our old ageless antiquity buildings like our granary and our brickyard. You even see old antiquity buildings like our bath and our fishing quay here. These will be updated in time from the new buildings that we'll build over top of them, but the things that will remain throughout the entire game include our Roman unique form, as well as our wonders. Most of the immediate infrastructure changes are just in the edges of your quarters, but you know, you can see your monument's still here, your altar's still here. A lot of things are still here. Now, with the beginning of the exploration age, some of you will like this, some of you might not like it. It basically depends on whether or not you were leading or not, but this is the first big rubber banding moment, bringing all of the players back a little bit closer in line, so the person that was way out ahead is no longer as far ahead. The player way behind is not as far behind. This includes equalizing everyone's techs as well as their civics, and you'll see that everyone's stats do sandwich much closer than they used to be because you lose a lot of adjacencies on some of your buildings. I'll get into that in a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong, those that are ahead are still ahead, and those that are behind are still behind. It's just brought a little more in line to give players more of a chance to either catch up or to make sure that the player doesn't feel like they're just snowballing way ahead the whole time. And I'm going to lay out exactly what has changed here now. One of the first things that happens at the turn of the era is that forced peace will be made with all civilizations. If you're in the middle of a war, you want to try to finish it before the era flips. In this game, we are lucky enough to get all of our objectives completed. But you'll also notice that we have brand new upgraded units. You have a swordsman, which is the tier 1 infantry unit of the medieval era. Our legion have upgraded into swordsman for free. It's tier 1 exploration era unit, now 35 melee strength instead of 25. These will later upgrade into man-at-arms at tier 2, and eventually will upgrade into pikemen at tier 3. I actually like the idea that pikemen are now an infantry-based unit. Swords are strong, man-at-arms are strong. Just having a unit with freaking halberds, though, like, come on. The halberds are such powerful weapons. In order to get all of your units to upgrade immediately, though, they teleported back into your town. So you'll see you have one unit here, another unit there. They come back to your city centers to upgrade. I have a couple more units here, and we can see we even have a heavy archer here. However, not all of your army will actually transition with you. Yes, you have free upgrades here, but you only get to bring 6 units from the previous era, unless you have an army commander. For each army commander you have, you can fill all the slots of the army commander. So we only had one army commander. Now we have our 6 units that transition plus the 4. So we have 10 units that transitioned. We have 8 swordsmen and 2 heavy archers. One of my archers didn't make it. Now all army commanders will transition with units. So if I just bought a second army commander before the era flipped, it would have brought not only another archer, but also my horse unit. To be honest, that's my mistake. The reason why they do this is because free upgrades on an era transition are actually really, really powerful. So the game doesn't want you to like spam like a whole bunch of cheap units, pre-building cheap units just to get free upgrades for them for having a crazy army at the start of the medieval era. But if you invest in expensive army commanders, there is still something you can do with that strategy. And your relationship with the AIs do carry over for the most part. It brings it back to the middle a little bit. Like if Ashoka was hostile with me, now he's only unfriendly, while Confucius here was super happy with me and now he's just friendly. At the start of new era, you do have a chance to reshape your relationships quite a bit. I think India will hate me soon though. I did get a bunch of free upgrades on a bunch of units, and I will want to use them shortly. You'll notice, though, some of my units that didn't transition are my siege units. If you look at the tech tree, the tier 1 siege unit actually isn't unlocked at the beginning of the era. It is actually at machinery, at catapults. Catapults then unlock into trebuchets, and then eventually all the way up into bombards. I originally hated this decision, but I had some conversations with some developers, and they were talking about a very specific problem that they had, especially in multiplayer, where players would pre-build a massive army, including trebuchets, and get a bunch of free upgrades, and then declare war on their neighbor, which kind of defeated the rubber banding mechanic, but also the idea of the exploration age, where players are still getting established. So this immediate war, but then not having the walls transition, made it so that people were defenseless. So they made it so that ancient walls now do transition the era, but they determined that the catapults transitioning and auto-upgrading was still too strong. At the top of the exploration era, you're going to have to unlock these catapults and produce those units manually, which honestly is not too big of a deal. We have a list of things that do carry over from age to age. So of course your leader comes over, right? Augustus the Immortal, but as well as the attribute points that you've been unlocking throughout the game. So it's important when you're teching up your leader that you are thinking about this throughout the entire game. The legacy points, of course, that you earn from the previous era by completing your legacy objectives. Your traditions come across. So if you look at our government, we do have our Roman traditions, but we don't have any of the previous cultural policies from the antiquity. Those policies are now obsolete, and for the most part, that is okay because you're going to have new policies unlocking in the civic tree that you'll want to be prioritizing instead. To be honest, it kind of clears the clutter from previous cards. Of course, your Golden Age will carry over a number of units to defend your settlements. So you have 6 at the start of the exploration era. Once you move into the modern era, you actually start with 9 units plus the units that you keep with your commanders. The commanders and the promotion levels do stay. So you can see I still have this level 7 army commander. He's no longer the legatus. Unfortunately, I didn't settle both of his city charges, but that's okay. I already have 9 out of 10 cities, so we're fine there. And all of the settlements that we made in the previous era have, of course, carried over. You can see all of these settlements. So one of the most important things you can do in antiquity is literally just get your empire established, get a bunch of settlements made, try to fill your settlement limit, good settlements with access to the sea for the Age of Exploration goals coming up. Things that don't carry over specifically are things like your civilization. So of course we transition civs. All of our cities actually revert into towns, except for the capital. Capital of Rome is still a city with a production queue, but all of your other settlements now get converted back into towns. This gives you the ability to redecide which of your settlements will be towns and which will be cities. But there is a way, I'll show you in a second, to keep the cities as you wanted them. Each of your towns also get a new ability to refocus on a different town focus. But at the fall of your previous empire, you will need to be establishing some amount of gold in order to get your cities up and running back at full capacity. We have all our building bonuses are removed. So this, as I mentioned before, you can see we still have our antiquity bath here with Roman architecture, but you'll notice that it only gives 3 food right now. This previously was giving 7 food. And then you'll look over here at our garden and our market. These are only providing 2 food and 2 gold each. These buildings had adjacency to all 3 of these river tiles, as well as a wonder nearby. So why would they only generate 2 food and 2 gold? Well, any antiquity era building loses all adjacencies. So you do have the +2 from the inherent gold from the building itself, but the adjacency itself is lost. So you can see here, this arena are no longer getting extra happiness from these 2 mountains. The idea here being that these buildings become obsolete in a new era. For instance, the arena being a home of gladiators and bloodthirsty death matches went kind of to the wayside once the medieval ages came around, specifically from a lot of religious concerns and Christianity that decided, hey, maybe gladiators shouldn't be killing each other. But you are able to replace these antiquity buildings with new exploration era buildings. You see, here is the bazaar. This is the market replacement. This exploration era market was very specifically representative of the Arabian style of market. It does get these adjacencies. You can see it actually has +3 gold instead of +2, and then the adjacencies from the river and coastal and wonder tiles. So this new exploration era building is actually new, and it's better than the previous market. Not only is it better because the market itself is nerfed, but this building is actually just better. So when you transition into the next era, you get the chance to overbuild. Any building that is not ageless and is now obsolete, you can build directly over top of the market that you had here previously. You could go ahead and put this on a different tile, for instance, on this river tile, and have a 6 gold bazaar as well as a +2 market. However, your ability to balance rural and urban districts in one city is quite limited if you're within 3 tiles. So I'm gonna want to replace it sooner rather than later. So I will be putting the bazaar on this tile. You can see there's actually an icon here. This shows the garden and the market. Technically, the garden was built first. So when I place down the bazaar, it's going to replace the garden first. And then this will be a bazaar and a market. It's gonna be a very high gold tile. Yeah. This is like in the real world when a town has been around for a while and they can't just keep every building. They need to tear something down to build something new, and things change over time. The fact remains that you are getting some initial yields from your original buildings. Like building my library and my barracks here are still giving me 2 food and 2 production. So I do have a benefit, and my previous decisions still matter. So it's not useless that I built these buildings. They are giving me some yield, but I will be wanting to look to replace them with better buildings here very shortly. On the new era, the map is actually populated with new goodie huts as well. So if we take a look around, we might be able to find new goodie huts. Most of these are going to be in the exploration areas or deep sea areas. So you can see there's a shipwreck here that I want to find eventually. Any uncompleted quests are lost, of course, your legacy path, but also any specific quests that you had started in the last era. You'll notice as the major civilization of Rome did technically collapse, but has recoalesced as a new Norman empire, our minor civilizations, our little city-state friends, did not make the transition. This does open up room for us to settle, but there will be new city-states for us to go find in the distant lands. I'm not sure how I feel about them going away, but considering how strong city-states are in the game, like this cultural city-state was giving us +2 culture on every single monument for every single city-state that we were using of. If they stayed around for the entire game, that could get pretty crazy. Technically, if you incorporate a city-state into your empire, then it will stick around, but that's different. Of course, all of the resources that you have improved come with you. However, there's actually a big change to how resources act in each era. You'll notice here that we have access to a new resource called Niter. Remember, iron gives combat strength to infantry units, horses give combat strength to cavalry, and then Niter gives combat strength to siege as well as naval units. You'll see I still have my resources, so you'll see things like iron, horses, and Niter. Things like marble are still improved and give production towards wonders. Gold gives the gold purchase discount, and so does the silver. Wine does the same effect. But you'll notice we have a new empire resource here called furs. These furs are a brand new resource for the exploration era, and I must have one improved. Yes, right here. You look at the little foxies, signifying the explosion of the fur trade in the exploration era. And these are giving 3 happiness in the capital and 10% gold while in a celebration. And then, of course, we have our previous city resources like jade giving 15% gold, silk giving culture. But you'll remember things like gypsum that gave 2 production to the capital and +4 production to any city that wasn't the capital now acts differently. Now it gives 3 production to homeland cities, but 6 production to distant land cities. So just like gypsum in the antiquity era was encouraging you to develop new cities, now gypsum is encouraging you to develop new cities in distant lands specifically. That's of course going to be later on in the era, but you'll notice very specifically that there's a couple of big changes to a couple of resources, like incense, which used to give us science, now gives 100% production towards missionaries and temples. And then we have truffles here, which is brand new. We actually lost access to salt. But now we have truffles, which does the same effect, giving a production towards training units. So we have some truffles right here. And then, of course, we have our cotton and our dates giving us food and happiness. And then we have a new bonus resource, ivory, which used to be an empire resource. Now it's a bonus resource because marble's buffed. Marble now gives production to all wonders, regardless of terrain type. So that allows truffles to become a new bonus resource to go into your new towns. There'll also be a lot of brand new and also new types of resources in the exploration age in the new lands. You'll see the map here is actually expanded and gotten bigger. We'll also be able to get across the open ocean here soon. But if we look specifically at the legacy paths, these will tell you the new goals of the exploration era. Specifically, if we look at the military, you'll see instead of just conquering any city, now the military objective is about settling settlements in distant lands specifically. You get 1 point for each settlement, and this is doubled if it's conquered, but only if it's in distant lands. This is actually quadrupled if you convert that settlement to your religion as well. The objective, trying to incentivize you to settling settlements in distant lands. You'll see this very specifically in the economic objectives as well, because gaining 30 treasure fleets from returning distant land treasures, but involves settling on treasure resources on the islands and distant lands, which will then give you treasure fleets, which then you bring back to your homeland. The Cultural Legacy path is all about displaying 12 relics in your empire now. You'll notice your codex, your previous great works, actually also don't carry over. All of our codex, like the Great Library of Alexandria, were lost to time, and we no longer have access to that science return from those great works. The great works being part of the scientific legacy path in the antiquity, now the great works of relics are the legacy path of the cultural victory. You'll notice all of our trade routes also do not make it. If we look at our units, we no longer have our caravans and our trade ships. It seems with the momentary collapse of civilization that we all stopped trading with each other for a little bit, but we will be able to reestablish those here shortly. You also lose access to your pantheon, but remember, pantheons are mostly tied to altars, and you're going to be overbuilding your altars, so that's actually not a big loss. Instead, it's going to be replaced with a religion soon. Now that I've talked about all the things that have changed, I do want to actually go ahead and pick our legacies. This is, of course, the beginning of the exploration era. And depending on how far you got in the previous era, you get certain boosts to the things in this era. This includes actually keeping some of the things that I was talking about that we just lost. But because we got a Golden Age, we actually have unlocked the Pax Imperatoria Golden Age, where we gain a unique infantry unit in every settlement that you conquer last age. This actually helps you bring some of your army, so whether or not they were from the previous era or to replenish the previous era to get a military up and running very early on. Now, I often find that this is actually kind of underwhelming because I already have plenty of infantry, especially if I had enough commanders to bring those over. But say if this gave machinery for free and then also gave you like 2 free catapults, that would make this incredibly good. Add a workaround for getting catapults to actually transition through the era while making it something that's actually difficult to accomplish, especially in a multiplayer environment. Especially when fealty here is +2 settlement limit, which is just strictly just better. I also want to take the militaristic attribute point here because I have more plans to do some warfare. In terms of our cultural legacies, I did not get a Golden Age, but we do have the Wondrous Heritage, which will give you additional happiness and culture on your wonders. Or you can spend these on diplomatic and cultural attribute points. I'll take the Wonder, Culture, and Happiness for the fun of it. And then we have our economic Golden Age and legacies, where we have 3 points to spend. Since I had 2 different legacy paths where I had completed a Golden Age, I can either pick Pax Imperatoria Golden Age or I can pick the Silk Roads Golden Age, but I can only pick one of these. As I just said, we already have enough infantry. I don't need 3 more, but I would rather use the Silk Roads to make sure that all of my cities from the previous age remain as cities. I don't want to spend the gold to reconvert all of them and how much time that will take to do that. So I'll be taking the Silk Roads Golden Age. But here's Master Carabiner, plus 5 gold for every trade route in antiquity. This is the way you actually make it feel like you kept your trade routes from the previous era. Even though our trade routes are no longer established with the other civs, I can reestablish those trade routes. But on top of that, I can take the Master Carabiner Golden Age here in order to keep the gold per turn from those trade routes that I did have established. That uses my last of my legacy points. If you had gotten a cultural legacy Golden Age, you did have the ability to get Golden Age amphitheaters, which means your antiquity era amphitheaters would have kept their adjacencies and been just as strong and not be able to be built over top of, so that you would have a boost to your culture at the start of the era. The Scientific Golden Age would also have the same thing, but for Golden Age academies, where your academies will keep their science adjacencies into the next era. Your libraries don't. Your libraries will still be replaced, but your academies would be. I actually didn't build any amphitheaters or any academies in the previous era, but that's okay. You'll notice I can't take the Dark Age here. That's because you have to actually decide between either all of these bonuses or a single Dark Age bonus. But gaining a random technology boost every 5 turns, but negative 50% in science, that sounds crazy. And then we have the ability to actually move our capital. So the capital of Rome is very strong here with a ton of districts and a ton of wonders. And it does have river access to the sea, but this river access is actually into like an Antarctic Ocean. Oftentimes it will be beneficial for you in the exploration era to move a capital to a new location. In this case, a nice coastal access to the new world. I could also do that to Wasset over here on this coast, but given that I really like the middle of the map river access on this city, I'm going to go ahead and move the capital to Pavadium, which actually renames this city into Ruin. I'm going to go confirm the legacies, and now we have a new capital, of course, the founding location of the Norman people. You'll see at age progression, we're at age progress 1 out of 200. And then we're going to take a look at the technology tree. Now, I've been hearing a lot online about how it feels like the exploration era completely skips to the medieval era. And while I understand that sentiment, because the eventual goal of the exploration era is to explore and settle distant lands and colonize, that's like the end of the exploration era, that which is the Renaissance era, the age of colonization. The beginning of the exploration era is still very, like, look at catapults, crossbows, man-at-arms, trebuchets. There's still very much of the medieval era represented here in the technology tree. We have, of course, feudalism and guilds, which are actually civics in Civ 6, which is funny to see them now as technologies. But of course, we also have things like cartography and astronomy being discovered a little bit earlier than you would have in a game like Civ 6. But you don't want to get too tripped up on these words if you're familiar with previous Civ titles. Like, shipbuilding here does not mean basic shipbuilding, like classical era shipbuilding like it did in Civ 6. This means like reinforced shipbuilding, where you can start building cataracts and you can sail the seas without any fears. In early cartography here is a very early, like, you are learning the ability to make maps. Astronomy, you're learning the ability to track the stars at night so you can sail in a straight line. Like, this is very early exploration era technology. And the beginnings of your exploration process, where you can start sailing and scouting the new world. Speaking of scouts, your scouts don't carry over. Poor guys. Your scouts also don't make the era transition. They found, because the scouts end up dying in the seas, that they're not quite useful. Instead, you end up getting a couple of free boats, these cogs, which will help you explore the early oceans. It still hurts a little bit that your scouts don't carry over, but I guess it does make sense. You do get free boats instead. A lot of players go straight for cartography and getting their settlers rushed out into the distant lands. I'm actually going to go ahead and focus more on the immediate military buffs. This medieval era technology can be quite a bit of fun. I did show you the military objective here is all about gaining settlements in distant lands. So the game does want to encourage you, instead of conquering the rest of your continent, they do want you to look further out, look bigger, go out and colonize. Especially because if you're conquering settlements on your own continent, you can be filling up your settlement limit, which will then make it harder to go colonize later. But that doesn't mean you can't not do war on your home continent. Because Ashoka here really doesn't like me, I'm never going to feel safe on the lower half of this continent here if he has 2 settlements right in my face. Like, I want to establish control of the entire southern end of this continent, but I want to be able to control this very defensible mountain chain with these chokes here, so that I never feel like I'll ever be threatened from these 2 civilizations nearby, especially because the modern era gets very into some crazy warfare. So the next video, I prioritize a fun medieval era war with some chevalier while I talk about the basics of the exploration era. And if you want to see more Civ 7 content, I will be live almost the entire day on both Twitch and YouTube tomorrow. February 5th is the official live streaming embargo lift, which means we streamers can now stream from the game and answer any question that you have live and in person. Of course, if you're watching this in the future, you can also go ahead and see the VOD on Twitch or YouTube, or leave a comment below and I'll try to answer anything that I can. You nerds have been absolutely wonderful, and we're almost already at 5,000 subscribers already. That's crazy. So thank you for joining. The comments have been absolutely amazing. You guys are wonderful, and I'll see you guys next time. Later, nerds.